into her most passionate interest. Real life enthralled Ellen, as long as it did not include her. The rare occasions she needed to be seen exhausted her. It was just too much effort, and opened the door to participation, the prospect of which horrified her more than running out of snack food or, unthinkably, bacon. By 24, Ellen had perfected her own invisibility to the degree that even her cat, Mouse, seemed only vaguely aware of her. Ellen and Mouse shared the one-room apartment and a love of caloric excess, especially bacon, but not much else. The front door of that narrow studio apartment opened onto the main room. A dozen steps brought her to the kitchenette, which ended in a back door featuring a small window. Gazing through a triple layer of small grimed screen, dirty glass slats, and wrought iron security bars, Ellen could see into a tiny courtyard smothered in gravel the color of bleached tombstones. It was a desolate spot. No whimsical water feature softened its echoing walls, and there was an utter absence of refreshing greenery. Occasionally, Ellen would notice a weed that had strained its way upward through the sharp chunks of granite, but inevitably, its goal finally realized, the vegetation would take a look at the harsh environment, topped off by a minuscule patch of smoggy, dirt-brown sky, and die. She imagined that its last thought, if plants had thoughts, had been, "I'd rather be mulch." Across that narrow, back-access space, she could look into the kitchens of the neighbors she so vigilantly avoided. In the window across from hers was a blanket, sun-faded and tacked up with nails she had watched the young couple pry from the molding, the fabric blocking her view into the only other upstairs unit with infuriating opacity. But on the ground level, there were two apartments whose renters were so lazy and hopeless that they had never bothered with any kind of window covering, probably because, Ellen thought, it had never occurred to them that anyone would take an interest in their lives. Because their lives weren't interesting, except, of course, to Ellen, who found constant fascination in how the occupants, whom she thought of as her pets, spent their hours. The girl in 1B, Ellen called Heidi because, when she wasn't dressed for work, a cocktail waitress or a prostitute to judge from the outfits, she wore her blonde hair in two braids that hung limply down the sides of her scrubbed pink face. The man in 1A she dubbed T-Bone because he was as thin as a rib, and the bandana he appeared intent on wearing until it rotted off was the color of raw meat. A few months earlier, Heidi's midsection had started to swell. Her pregnancy, now at about 8 months, Ellen guessed from the soccer ball protrusion under her straining T-shirt, caused an interruption in whatever employment she did have, and now Heidi spent most of her time in the apartment, screaming at herself in a mirror or crying at her kitchen table. Ellen followed Heidi's antics with the enthusiasm of a sports fan during a playoff series. Tonight, with a bag of chips in one hand and a Tinkerbell pen in the other, Ellen made notes on one of the lined school pads so generously and unwittingly donated by her employer to her cause. "Heidi gets a beer," she wrote as she crunched a handful of cheddar chips into paste, debates over whether to drink it for 10 minutes, then downs it in 45 seconds. A minute later, she added, throws up beer in the sink. Shifting her gaze to the next window, she saw T-Bone. The most interesting thing T-Bone did was repackage big bags of marijuana into smaller ones. Tonight, he was seated in his easy chair, smoking what Ellen had overheard him call a Bob's Big Boy. The smallness of the space and the unmuffled solidity of the courtyard's walls sent any sound echoing up to her apartment, so it was easy for her to hear what she wanted to, and impossible to block out what she didn't. T-Bone kept a sad potted plant on his windowsill, which he'd forgotten to water again today, a misdemeanor Ellen dutifully recorded. She had quite a collection of these notebooks, carefully labeled with the corresponding dates, and glancing at the shelf where she kept them, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Slow night, Ellen thought, as she closed her notebook, stuffing it into a large canvas sack. The impending entry into the world outside brought on a bout of compulsive repeat.